So talking about specular, let's take a look at our options here. I'm going to go up to the top and I'm going to do a new paint layer. And this time I'm going to choose specular. And I do recommend that you paint with black and white. Again, black and white. And on this surface, because we don't have a lot going on, go ahead and actually show you via a stamp. Now, I might not see much in here. I gotta make sure that my object has the correct material. So I do want to remind you that when you're bringing in your mesh, chances are you're bringing it in as a Lambert. It by default will normally come in this way, and that is going to be the standard material that you're working with. I'm going to go back underneath my layers here, and I can paint, but when I'm doing specular, I want to be able to see that effect actually taking place in my viewport. In other words, you'll see areas that are shiny and areas that are more matte start to appear. So what I'm going to do is come down here, and just like I had before, the gray flat, here is a flat texture. And then I have options here for creating some shine. So in other words, you want to work with shaders that are going to give you a high gloss finish, so you can see that specularity. Remember, this is also changing some of the properties of what you're seeing in the viewport. That doesn't mean these properties are going to necessarily export with your new textures. So keep that in mind. So you don't want to work with something like this. It's going to be hard to work with in general. Now your default, again, I always prefer that you guys use the gray flat when you're just getting that texture down. In other words, your base texture, your diffuse. And then of course your addition of the blend or your shine can come right next to it here, where you've got the gray light. And then over here you have, of course, kind of a gesso, a little bit brighter. And then you can work in some of these. But what we're really doing is we're painting a texture map. In other words, we're going to be painting how the specular map's going to look once we start to actually apply it. So I'm just going to go ahead and let me go to my paint tools. And right now I'm painting on the specular. And I've got this brush set. I'm going to turn the brush off so you can see really what's happening here. So as I'm painting, you're probably thinking you're adding white, but I'm actually adding a shine. So notice how when I move it around, it's actually a very intense shine. It's being fed by this material. So if I change my material too, you will see a difference. Okay, let's try this. So with the intense gloss applied, I'm actually going to trace this default gray here. You can see it a little bit better. I'm going to go ahead and paint black, because black's going to remove that. So what that means is any variation in between, so your 256 shades of gray are going to give you different values. And it's interesting that you see this here, because I actually do have a slight specularity to even the area I haven't done yet. But when I paint it, I'm actually removing that and creating more of a matte finish. So let me go ahead and let's apply now. Let's go ahead and paint with, we'll do white, but this time I'm going to use a stamp because I really kind of want to see a little bit more going on. Use this guy here. Let's reduce our strength, which is also going to, of course, reduce the intensity on that. Let's choose something a little bit more flicked. There we go. So I can reduce the strength. I can also work in a mid-gray, and that's going to help as well. So when light hits the surface, it's going to bounce back, send me that information. So every surface will have some noise of some kind, some texture, even if it's very, very subtle. And you will also see some elements that are specular. Even if it's matte, you want to add just a little bit, just tiniest bit of specularity to it to make it believable. So keep that in mind when you're working. Let me go ahead and try. Again, you can work with these different shaders. Remember, it's changing the underlying color too. And that's a big part to do with it. Okay. So now we have a really nice variation here. Not perfect, but it'll do. And I'm going to go ahead and look at our next option. So I'm going to go under my layers here. And we've got gloss. Remember, gloss is going to give us that kind of finite highlight. In truth, you just need your diffuse, specular, and our exported bump maps, or I should say normal maps, excuse me. But I want to have you play with gloss just to see what you can get with the gloss maps, okay? It's important to go ahead and experiment because you're going to start to see some really interesting techniques or results come from that. Nothing wrong with you combining these. Let's look at our next map that we can take a look at here. Incandescence, again, think of that candle that you can see through. If you, hold your hand up to a light, you can kind of see that, look through your hand and you can almost see the color change on your skin there. So think about things like that with incandescence. Chances are you might want to play with this if you have a scenario with a candle or something like that, but you may not be using it. So it's one you can overlook. Opacity is going to be an opacity map if you have some transparency that you want to incorporate. Many of you will not be using this. Your vector displacement is something that we're not going to be using, but that's another black and white map. Your bump map and normal map can both be created. There's lots you can do with an exported map, and you can modify it in Photoshop and have some fun with it too. Reflection mask is something that you also can work with, but again, we want to work primarily with these two up here and then your eventual normal map. Now we're going to be creating your normal map from your actual texture or your sculpting that you did and your base mesh. So we're going to be taking a look at that in a different video. But with your maps, what you want to start doing is exporting these. So to delete a layer, you simply do delete, right? And to export any of these layers, again, you can right click on these and you can do a simple export selected or export to Photoshop and do some adjustments. So I'm going to go ahead and do export selected, and I'm going to locate my folder here. That's me. And we're going to go ahead and save these off. And you can choose your format. So I'm going to go ahead and, just to kind of give you an idea here, I'm going to go ahead and choose a JPEG. So this is going to be rock underscore, this is my specular map, so I'm going to name it correctly. And then the same thing with my diffuse. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do export selected as my diffuse. Well, let's take a look at these. So my diffuse, not too shabby, again, not completed. And then my specular map looks like this. So again, the black and white map can be adjusted if you want to go into Photoshop and change some of these areas. You can even layer other textures in Photoshop to add more interesting information to your surface. So these are the two maps that, again, are primarily going to be submitted. I do encourage you to play around and have some fun with these. And of course, when you come up here, many of you have looked at this area here and extract texture maps. We're going to be doing that for our normal maps. and we're going to be doing that shortly.